Dr. Norm Shealy, who is the founder of the American Holistic Medical Association, wrote on the back of my book, Dr. Kolb has exposed yet another serious FDA defect, allowing not only unsafe drugs, but clearly toxic silicone inserted into the bodies of otherwise healthy people. The Hippocratic Oath is even more important, more critical today, since each physician must first do no harm. And that's what we're going to talk about today, doing no harm. Areas of concern include genetically modified foods, EM radiation and cellular telephones, cosmetics and personal care products, implants, including breast implants, nanotechnology, and radiation devices. So, add to this whistleblowers. We had in 2009, 9 whistleblowers, current and former scientists working for the FDA, wrote a letter to President Obama alleging FDA managers violated laws, rules, and regulations, suppressed or altered scientific or technological findings and conclusions, abused their power and authority, and engaged in illegal retaliation against whistleblowers. Now, you may not be aware of this, but there was a Supreme Court ruling on the Medtronic case. Medtronic makes medical devices, stating that manufacturers of federally approved medical devices, FDA approved, cannot be sued under state law if the device causes an injury. So really now we have a perfect storm. We have an agency that, according to its own internal documents, cannot meet the demands on it to accurately analyze the science. Then we have the whistleblower saying that frequently science and reason take a backseat to money and power. And then you have a legislative precedent that says if an injured device gets on the market and injures you or a member of your family, you have no recourse. You cannot be compensated. So think about it. Now you might understand why it's so important for you to know what you're putting in your body. So this brings us to the precautionary principle. The precautionary principle states we have an ethical imperative to prevent rather than merely to treat disease, especially in the face of scientific uncertainty. This is especially true with new technologies that have never been out there. Nanotechnology, genetically modified foods, cellular telephones, Wi-Fi, all the things that the public has never been exposed to. This should make you angry. There was only one company that used genetically modified bacteria to make L-tryptophan. All the other companies didn't use genetically modified bacteria. And a new disease called eosinophilic myalgia syndrome was traced to only this company's L-tryptophan product. 2,000 patients became very ill and 19 deaths occurred. Instead of recognizing that the danger was from the GM, which they were trying to protect during this time, the FDA bans all L-tryptophan, and the deputy director of the FDA in 1991 reported to a congressional committee that the L-tryptophan EMS incidents that's the focus of this hearing demonstrates the dangers inherent in the various health fraud schemes that are being perpetrated upon segments of the American public. Therefore, the FDA uses this incident to justify its extension of its authority over nutritional supplements. There's no labeling requirements for GM foods. Now, go look in the inner aisles of any supermarket. Everything has modified cornstarch and or high fructose corn syrup. And I did an interview with Dr. Staninger. She's an environmental toxicologist. She told me that modified cornstarch is modified so it has plastic in it. Over 80% of the corn in the U.S. may now be genetically modified with the Bt toxin due to contamination of adjacent crops. And both Bayer and Monsanto have admitted that they can't keep the genetically modified foods from contaminating all the others. Whole Foods came out and said it could no longer say that it did not have genetically modified foods on its shelves, okay? Because I know some of you are thinking, well, I'll just go to Whole Foods or Trader Joe's. They just can't. There's too many things in the food line that are potential points for the GM to come in. And so you may, and because there's no labeling requirements, it may be very difficult for you to make sure you don't have genetically modified foods unless you grow your own foods and aren't close to where the wind can blow seeds into your area that are genetically modified to contaminate your crop. Now, the next topic is EM radiation and cellular telephones. I interviewed Dr. Carlo, who was hired by the cell phone industry to do $20 million worth of research. And when his research showed some things that they didn't want it to show, his house mysteriously burnt down, and he had to go underground where he wrote this book and try to stay away from corn. I wrote a letter to Orville Redenbacher, and I wrote him an email saying that I was concerned about genetically modified corn, and I got this answer back saying that the government says genetically modified corn is safe. So I wrote him a little email. I said, well, and I outlined all the studies showing it isn't. And I said, you might want to rethink this, because as a doctor, I'm seeing a lot of people have allergic reactions to genetically modified corn, bloating, you know, pretty severe reactions pretty soon after eating it. And so if that happens with your popcorn, your sales are going to go down. Now, I never heard back from him. But I think if all of you write to Orville, you know, you got to actually write to him and say, I got sick from your product, you know. Please take the genetic, I mean, we vote, and this is really, really important to understand, we vote with what we buy off the shelf.